மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. தேங்க்யூ.
Well, to close the update, I want to just have a little look at knight c3. This is a move which has never really posed a great deal of threat to Alekhine. But over the last few years, the Danish Grandmaster Johnny Hector has been using it with a great deal of success. And he's been particularly effective in the line where black goes d5, white goes e5, and now black plays d4. Hector has shown that black may have some problems in the line after e takes f6, d takes c3, f takes g7, c takes d2 check, bishop takes d2, bishop takes g7, and now queen f3. Yeah, this has been proving problematic for black. So my own view is it's probably best to avoid this line. Hector has also been demonstrating advantages for white after knight e4 and knight fd7. So perhaps it's time to take a fresh look at this position and see if we can find something else for black, which is respectable and muddies the waters against 2 knight c3. Now let me say at this point, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going back into a Vienna after e5. I mean, that may be the most reliable move of all. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you do that, you have to have good responses against the Vienna itself, against the 4 knights, against the bishop's opening. There are all manner of openings that white can play on you, so you have to know a lot if you go back into the open game. To keep the game more in Alekhine territory, which is kind of messy, if you like, what about Alekhine's old move e6, which was one of his original suggestions in this opening, and a move which isn't really at the forefront of Alekhine theory at all, seems to give black a reasonable game in all lines, and which has been used by various grandmasters. I mean, just in this one game, we're going to see fragments of games from Thomas Luther, Zoltan Varga, and in our feature game, from Alekhine connoisseur Alexander Baberin. Well, of course, white can play d4 against e6, but then black need not go slavishly back into a French. He can consider moves such as bishop b4, and already after move 3, we've got a very peculiar position, which resists theory, and that's quite rare in 2011. So this may be quite an interesting way to play. Now, the normal way for white, and this will occur in 9 games out of 10 after e6, is just to push forward with e5 and then to double black's pawns, and then probably to go d4. There was this very weird game of Rombaldoni against Thomas Luther, which was played in Germany in 2007, which went c4, and then again the position was extremely original after only a few moves, but you can't help but feel in this position after 7 moves that black already has the upper hand. White has won a pawn, but well, it's not much of a pawn, is it? It's just a doubled, isolated pawn. All of black's pieces are in play. White hasn't got a single piece out. And, well, I mean, this just seems good for black to me. As you can see from the game score, black won in 17 moves. I mean, I don't know whether white had to play bishop d3, but queen g5, it just became wild. Going back, d4 is answered by d6. And now white has to make a fundamental choice. In the game Goloshapov versus Varga, Miskolc 2004, white played bishop f4, black took on e5. Now if white takes with the bishop, knight c6 gains some time. So Goloshapov took with the pawn, but that gave black the opportunity to stake out a claim in the centre. And after knight f3, knight c6, c3, h6, preparing bishop e6, h3, bishop e7, queen d2, queen b6. Black was in very good shape. Probably white put his bishop on f4 and queen d2, getting ready for black castling on the king side, after which white would go in with bishop takes h6. But Varga just steers a course around that. He gets his counterplay together with d4 and g5, and then he goes long. And clearly black again is absolutely fine here, with more than his fair share of the game. So Machak played f4 in our game, which comes from the Four Nations Chess League in England back in 2005, and Baberin took, already setting a little trap. Well, of course this is very superficial, but you never know. D takes e5, D takes e5, and now already after 7 moves, once again with his unorthodox idea black has got a very reasonable game. Bishop d3 was answered by castles, and it's worth pointing out in this position that bishop takes h7 check isn't working. If knight g5 check and then queen h5, black has a simple bishop f5, which refutes white's concept. So Maček went queen e2, and now black played f6, and that is a very strong move. As black has castled and white hasn't, Baburin decides to take active operations against white's centre. Bishop e3. I don't actually think too much of that move, to be honest with you, but perhaps white just couldn't see a way to get his king to safety if he didn't play it. The position's opening up. If white plays bishop d2, angling to castle long, then probably black is just very reasonably placed here after takes on e5 and bishop g4. There's no doubt about it, black has emerged from the opening probably slightly better, and this impression continued after some exchanges in the centre and then bishop g4. I mean, we're just reaching a sort of middle game where white's pawn on e5 is weak. And sure enough, over the next couple of moves, Baburin trains his sights on that pawn. Basically, white is struggling to draw this position. He tries bishop b5. There's a capture on f3. I think this is actually going to win a pawn for black after bishop takes g2. King takes g2, b takes c6. Rook takes f8, rook takes f8. And now the problem for white is, of course, if he takes on a7, let's just drop back. He plays e6 in the game. If he takes on a7, black can take on e5, or he could play perhaps queen g5 check. Either of these moves looks very good. So e6 was played, hoping that the pawn would tie black up. No such luck, as once again, black gets a very easy game. King f8, king g2, king e8, queen e5 only ties black up for an instant. Now the threat is queen g5 check, exchanging off into a winning king and pawn ending. So king h1 and now queen f6 is just driving white all the way back. Obviously, white takes on c7, queen f1 is mate. So white has to go all the way back to e1, and that's the last thing you want to happen in a queen ending, to get your pieces placed passively like this. So the rest of this game is fairly easy, although Baburin chooses a complicated way at the end, which he needn't have done. Queen f5 check, king g2, the king can't step onto the e-file. This is a very easy win for black. I mean, he could even take on c2 with check in this position. a4, queen g6 check, king f1, queen f5 check. There's a lot of toing and froing. Eventually, we get to the final position. b4, and now Baburin plays queen takes e6, and Maček resigned. One can't help but get the impression the last 5 to 10 moves of this game were played in time trouble. Otherwise, why would black have rejected the easy win after queen takes c2? B takes a5 and now d3. This seems to me to be a much quicker way of deciding events than the game. But, well, I suppose you can't get more speedy than the win on time. So that was it. White either resigned or black won on time. Let's just see how this works. Queen takes, king takes, b takes a5, and now black plays king d7. I'm sure queen takes c2 was less complicated than this. But let's see how it all works out. It gets to a win for black in the end. White has to come up and take the d pawn, which he does. Black takes on a5. White moves in. There's 2 captures, and now the winning move is g4. That is that. h4, h5, h4 is coming. g3. White has to play some move like king d5 and now king b4. And white can't manage all his responsibilities. So I think actually, going back right to the opening, e6 is not at all a bad move. And there's not a lot of theory on it. So maybe you can use this lack of knowledge to your advantage in your own games. It seems like a decent practical way for black to play. d5 always struck me as reasonable but rather simplistic. And, well, not everybody wants to go back into a Vienna.
மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. தேங்க்யூ.